everyone, here is my tutorial for the Creations by Mache pattern number 107. There are 2 collar options and a third variation that omits the collar altogether. Regardless of the collar you choose, you should be able to follow this tutorial to put together the bubble. But if you decide to do the pointed collar like I did, you'll have 4 of these to cut out. If you did the rectangular collar, you'll have 2 of those. And if you didn't do a collar, well, you can just skip those pieces. Now, if you want to embellish your collar, I'd recommend doing that before cutting out your pieces. If you are doing suspenders, you'll cut out 2 of those pieces. Then you'll have 1 front piece cut on the fold, and I like to put little notches where those tucks are going to go later on both the top of the tuck and the bottom of the tuck. Then you'll have 2 back pieces, and I notch where the facing is going to fold under later on. And then you'll have 2 sleeves, and you'll have 1 front bubble bottom cut on the fold, as well as 1 back bubble bottom cut on the fold. Now, something that I'm doing special with this outfit is using a little bit of lace to make suspenders, as well as to embellish those sleeves. You'll see what I mean later in the video, and as always, everything is linked below in the description box. So to get started, first I put the collar pieces together, and if you're skipping the collar, then just move on to the next step. Timestamps are in the description box below. Regardless of which collar you're doing, you'll put the collar pieces right sides together and sew around the outer edges, so not the edge for the neckline, with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then trim up the seam allowance and the corners before you turn the collar right sides out. And I like to use this little pointer tool to push those corners into a nice neat point, and it is linked below. After ironing my collar down, I moved on to those tucks in the front of the shirt. To make each tuck, I matched up the notches on the top and the bottom of that tuck, and then I ironed everything into place, and I sewed straight down from one pair of notches onto the other pair of notches. And I just continued that process, although I will say I gained a little bit of help along the way. Lucky me. And somehow I forgot about those suspenders before I did the French seams. I'm not sure what was on my mind. So some of the footage may not be coherent, but here are the steps you should take if you're not having a little helper distract you. If you want to put in the suspenders, then you can fold the fabric in half lengthwise, sew it together, and then turn the suspenders right sides out as directed by the pattern. Instead, I used this lace as the front of the suspenders and the fabric as the back. So with right sides together, same concept, I sew down each side of the lace and then use a safety pin to turn the right sides out. Then you'll base the suspenders in place where you like them before joining the shoulders of the shirt together with a French seam. And since I got distracted by my helper, I ripped out the stitches for the second part of the French seam so I could put my suspenders, kind of sandwich them in there and attach them in the second pass of the French seam. I hope that makes sense. Basically, I got distracted. I did completed French seam, ripped out those stitches, and then now I'm trying to put the suspenders in after the fact. So then I basted the bottom of the tuck so they were facing away from the center front of the shirt, and continued to base the bottom of each suspender. And after my little helper ironed all of that, then I moved on to the back of the shirt. I ironed under about 1/4 of an inch and then folded that down and ironed it, and then I folded it again until it lined up with those notches and again ironed that in place. Then I attached the collar to the shirt. First, I marked at the 5/8 of an inch point on each collar, and this helps you when you go to align the collar onto your shirt to make sure the collar doesn't have any gaps, between the 2 collars where you're going to sew them. Of course, if you're omitting the collar or if you're doing the rectangular collar, none of this applies to you. So then finally, I took the 2-inch wide bias strip and folded that in half and gave it an ironing. I lined up the raw edges of the bias band with the raw edges of the collar, making sure I had some overhang on the back of the shirt. Then I sewed the bias band onto the collar. And I never measure these bias strips. I just make them longer than what they need to be so I can trim them up afterwards. I just find that to be the easiest method. It's one less thing to think about and stress over. So then the pattern calls to understitch this band down by your machine, and while yes, though most of those stitches will be covered by the collar, I am going to hand sew this down. This is a fancier garment. Now, if this was a plaid garment, then I may be more tempted to sew it down by my machine, but like I say, it is sewing, you do you. Oh, but either method, make sure to fold those edges under that are hanging out and inside the band like so. That way you have a nice neat transition or start, whatever you want to call it, to your band. Okay, moving on to those sleeves. If you want to embellish them at all, I would do that before attaching them. I'm embellishing with that same lace from before, and I have a detailed video on how to attach entredot to flat fabric that I will link below. So from there, I folded the raw edge of the sleeve up twice until it was kind of flush at that bottom edge of the entre-deux lace, and then I'll hand sew this in place later on. And alright, we are making some progress now on to the bottom of that bubble. So I took the bubble back piece and cut down the center so I could make a placket. And I have 2 methods on making a placket, and I will link both videos below. After the placket was done, I sewed the bubble back to the bubble front at the side seams using French seams. Then I put 2 rows of gather stitches in the bubble around the waist, one on either side of where the permanent stitches are going to go. The idea of having 2 rows helps keep your gathers from going crooked on you when you sew on top of them, which is not a pretty look. It becomes a hot mess in a hurry. So then I took the waistband and folded it in half and ironed that down. Then I stitched on each end of the waistband, and after turning the waistband right sides out and poking those little corners out, I gave it a good ironing. Then I sewed the waistband onto the shirt from one center back all the way to the other center back. And next I adjusted the gathers on the bottom of the bubble until they were evenly distributed and the length of the waistband. And I pinned the bubble bottom to the waistband shirt combo and sewed from one center back again all the way around to the other center back. Then I trimmed that seam up and zigzagged over top of it. Of course, you could use a serger if you wanted to, but honestly, I'm not entirely thrilled with the construction of this seam, and I do have an idea that I want to try in the future, but for now, this method works, so I'm moving on. Anywho, after pressing that seam downwards, I moved on to finishing the crotch. First, I turned the raw edge up about 1/4 of an inch and gave that an ironing and folded up again until it was flush with those leg openings. After stitching on top of that, then I moved on to folding up the leg opening. First about 1/4 of an inch, and then again another 1/4, maybe it's like 3/16 of an inch, something like that. And that will create a casing. And then I stitch on top of that casing, starting from one of these little point areas to the other point, if you will. Then I cut a piece of elastic to the appropriate size. You can either reference the pattern, or better yet, if you have your little one to measure, go ahead and measure them. And then thread the elastic through the casing using a safety pin. When the end of the elastic gets to the start of the casing, then sew that side down before continue to pull the elastic through. Otherwise, you'll just continue to pull your elastic all the way through, and that's no good. And once the elastic is popping out the other side, then sew that side down as well. Now, after putting snap setters, snaps in the crotch, and hand sewing snap button combos to close the back, and doing all that hand finishing work, then I had this completed garment. Now, I do need to get in the habit of shortening these Creation by Miche patterns. They do seem to run a little bit long, but otherwise I think it is quite adorable. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, guys, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.